It was great. We were just going to have to sort of come in there and bring some other elements in and set it up.
Just days before they were going to demolish the building.
Literally, we had to hurry up and do it. So they said yes. We were ready to go. And at the last minute, one of the older people in the family said no.
Well, we also were asking them if we could flood the basement for the great flood of 1976 recreation.
So all of a sudden,
that kind of got their attention.
All of a sudden, like literally a week before we're going to film, we couldn't film in there.
Hey there. How do you turn a real town's history into something that feels like a movie without losing what actually happened? Well, today I'm joined by Salyer McLaughlin and Rhonda McLaughlin, the filmmaking team behind Boomtown, the story of downtown Frederick. It's a docudrama built from community memory, period recreation, and a huge local collaboration of over 400 people. We dove into the making of the film with an unexpected twist and how their projects are funded through a foundation, and the lessons they learned from doing their first docudrama after many years of commercial and just simply traditional documentary filmmaking. From Allegory Productions, and we'll name this agency later, this is Cam Lawson and Salyer and Rhonda McLaughlin. Why this for your first feature? Why this topic? What was like the spark that said this is the movie?
Yeah. Well, we've lived in Frederick, Maryland for about 25 years. My wife has lived, and partners has lived there longer. It's a great story about how a small town came back from almost complete economic disaster back in the 70s. Like a lot of small towns that turned into ghettos. People moved out to the suburbs, to the shopping malls, and then moved back into these great towns because of the architecture. So it's true of Baltimore, it's true of D.C., it's true of Frederick, Maryland. So we have a lot of history, too, that's really interesting. And there's a lot of defiance in that history. And I thought the story of why it attracted so many interesting artists and filmmakers and poets and so forth. And we thought we could raise enough money from the people that we knew and the foundations that we had connections with. We, too, are a foundation. We started at the Big Blue Foundation. It's a 501c3, so we can apply for grants through other foundations. Beautiful. And that was primarily the main source of where we got the funding. So we ended up raising almost $500,000 over the course of 2.5 years. And so we knew we had a good idea. We knew there was a great story, and we knew we could probably raise the money.
How did you come to the story?
The story itself?
Yeah.
I had read a book, From the Brink to Brilliant, which had just been released. I was researching for another documentary I was working on for one of the most prominent businesses in our downtown. It's a jeweler, Colonial Jewelers, and they had hired us to create a documentary on the 75 years that they had been in business. So in researching that project, I read several books, and including From the Brink to Brilliant. And when I read these 125 pages, I realized that there was a story that she had written, Kate McDermott, and I knew that I could follow the threads of that story and make it into a movie.
And so, Rhonda, for you, I know obviously the Homer, the writer director of it, but obviously you being involved, you growing up in Frederick, if I'm not mistaken.
Pretty much.
Well.
I moved there in 1982. So
okay.
I've seen a lot of change.
Now, is this just like helping your partner, or is there like an interest for you as well to like want to see this come to fruition?
We've talked about it for years about doing, if we did a smaller film for economic development for Frederick that was more of a business kind of film several years ago, and we've talked about it for a long time. Like, we should really tell the story of Frederick. I mean, there's a lot of stories about the old history of Frederick, Barbara Fritchie and all these kinds of things, but the more contemporary story. And, and the book that Salyer had read was a great book about, a handful of people who pushed the envelope and made things happen. And had they not done that, it wouldn't be the same town. And so when he started talking about this, and telling me about this book, one of the things that we realized right away was we need a more interesting character to tell it from someone else's perspective, because it was like basically, talking about 5 white guys and that's what it was. That's who they were. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's who it was. And there's so much more to Frederick than that. So how could we tell the story and integrate that into the story? How can we show that we have, a lot of diversity in Frederick and that there's more to this? There's other people that were involved in that story. They might not have been the people who made those marks directly, but they were part of that. And so we started looking for someone who we could tell the story through. And initially we thought, well, let's at least find a woman. Let's find a woman that we could tell. We couldn't find the right character for that. And that's when Salyer came across Amos Brown, who was the first Black chief photographer at the Frederick News-Post.
Wow.
And once we learned about him, started digging in, realized his family was very prominent in Frederick. I mean, still very prolific there in Frederick. We were like, this is our guy. Let's tell it.
And he was
lens.
he was the chief of photography the night of the flood, so it made perfect sense because basically the entire first half of the film happens over the course of one evening, and it's his point of view and his recollections looking back into history from a couple days after Martin Luther King was assassinated back in the late 60s to the mid 70s. So it's through his eyes that we see the history of Frederick, which is...
We're going to touch on a few different things you just mentioned. One is like the funding aspect of it, the foundation. I think that's a very unique funding model that a lot of people might not necessarily understand and know about. So I'd love to talk about that. But then also you just mentioned part one, and there's a part two. And so I want to talk about that. Before I get to that, though, you mentioned the character. And you mentioned like you were going into this with this idea of like wanting to tell the story of maybe about five guys. And you're like, that's not the way we want to go about it. You shift up and get to Amos Brown. How far into the story of like the first like iteration of the story from the five guys perspective did you get before you were like, let's pull back and actually go the opposite way?
Well, I mean, the story opens the night of the flood, and it's right away. It's in his car.
In the creation, the thinking, and the development of it, not when actually in the film itself.
I think it was pretty early on, actually, that Salyer found Amos Brown.
Well, people had told me that that these books about Frederick were all great books. George Delaplane, who was the publisher of the newspaper that's been around for 120 years. Another book that had been written by the popular mayor that had four straight terms, Ron Young. All rebels, all guys who were looking at their businesses and the growth of Frederick differently than the old guard was looking at it. And we just felt that these perspectives were great, but wouldn't it be so much greater to tell it from Black Americans' point of view? So right away we're in his spirit and in his eyes, and it was just a much more interesting way to tell it to tell the story. It's an unexpected way to tell the story about a bunch of guys that were really successful, but they were all white, and during a time when a lot of small towns were that way, and there were a lot of bias, and there was a lot of segregation, and there were a lot of things that have changed considerably in 50 years since the mid-'70s. And then when we pick it up at part two, we're in the eyes of his daughter, who is seeing a whole different world in 2025 than her dad saw in 1975. So
I think we were really impressed with the fact that that George Delaplane, the owner of the Frederick News-Post, was willing in 1968 to make his chief photographer a young Black man. I just think that's significant at that time period. I mean, I was only 1 year old. I was born in 1967. So, like, I know how much things have changed in that time. And so the idea that he and his staff were willing to do that, and always did. The more recent chief photographer for years was Sam Yu, a man from I think he was from China. And, so that I think that's really cool for a small town. You just don't see that.
Yeah.
You don't see that. You do now, but not in 1968. I think it was pretty significant. And when we learned that bit of information, we both just jumped on that. We were like, this is our guy. This is our guy. We're going to tell a story through his eyes. And
that's actually why I think the town of Frederick
excited.
has succeeded, has done as well as it has, because we got through a lot of the segregation issues before other bigger cities were overcoming that. And so we got a head start on that. And so while we still have problems, so as we still have, there are still issues there. We did well at as our scene from Asbury Church depicts 3 days after Martin Luther King's assassination, the coming together, the police chief and the mayor and Mac Mathias, who's a prominent politician here in the state of Maryland, came and were part of that service. And Sherman Mason was speaking. It was quite a revolutionary back in the day. And rather, when other towns were burning at that moment in time, ours was not. We were working out reconciliation with a fellow.
I love that.
It's helped us reach a broader audience,
Yeah.
We want to reach young people, too. We want to reach all people. If we just told the story exactly how it was, you're going to get the same people in Frederick that kind of already know that story, maybe. We want to reach a broader audience, and we really have. And it's been amazing. We've reached a huge audience in our own town so far, but it's already spreading. And that was kind of the whole idea. It's a much bigger message than what it might appear to be.
Especially during these times.
Yeah.
You need to be reminded.
Speaking of that, the character, or just the method of the story you took, not necessarily the method of characters in the story, did you find that you're able to keep it as authentic as much as possible? Sometimes based on a true story, you have to combine characters, you have to strip some things away just for the sake of creativity. Did you find that it was easy to kind of maintain that, or what were the challenges in doing that?
In making a docudrama?
Yeah, just the docudrama, for this docudrama specifically, did you find you have to create?
Well, we actually ran into some problems initially with the author of the book who, we had started out making a documentary. That was our initial intention, because she had written this book From the Brink to Brilliant, and it was just easy to just do a documentary on it. And another filmmaker started making a documentary on the same thing, basically. He was a fellow filmmaker, and he knew what we were doing. And he caught on to what we were doing. He thought, that's a great idea. I think I'm going to do the same thing. So we had to totally do a 180-degree turn on it. I said, well, let's not do that, because he was already scooping up all the interviews with all the prominent politicians and leaders. And so we thought, well, let's compress some timelines. Let's combine some characters, and let's make it a more emotional film about the town. And let's take some creative liberties, and let's call ourselves historical fiction. That way we won't have to completely be authentic to every fact. We can embellish some things. And in fact, I'm so glad we did, because it got us into doing something that we had never done before. I'd done plenty of documentaries, and they're great. But this gave us the opportunity to really be more emotional in the way that we delivered the film. And we took a few creative liberties, but it's all based on truth. And it's nice when you're doing historical fiction, because you can embellish some situations. You can compress the time so that things are just more entertaining and more compelling in a shorter period of time.
We were sensitive. It was challenging because we live there. We know all of these people. Most of the characters in the film are still living, and we know them personally. So that's kind of a little nerve-wracking, because you have to be so careful. I think we were really careful and really sensitive, and we're as authentic as we could be. The only people we really fictionalized a little bit were the artist, because we didn't make him who the artist might have been based off of for a number of reasons. And then Lexi, we fictionalized that a bit, because she really never did move to Frederick.
She was a real person, but she did not move. And we can get into why we used her as the vehicle for the second part of the film.
Everybody else was pretty.
But everybody, you've got 40 real people who are very important factors in why Frederick is what it is today. And, you don't need to get their permission in advance. You don't need that in writing. You do need them to understand what you're doing. And you don't need to outright say, hey man, do you mind if I'm using your character? Because if you ever did that, then they'd be like, well, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
And I need to,
they want influence.
I need to see the script, and then I need to see how I look.
How you portray me.
Yeah. So once you open that door, and with historical fiction, you don't need to do that. It's kind of like it goes without saying, I'm going to take the liberty to depict you in the movie. I'm not going to defame you. If you start defaming somebody, then you got problems.
A whole other issue there.
So everybody except the artist was in. And we didn't get any feedback back that there might be a problem, but we did with the artist because his proprietary rights of. He's a big public artist. He paints on this big. He's like. What's the artist's name? He's quite good. He started public art in our area. But who's the guy that's doing a lot of walls in Baltimore? Walsey?
Banksy?
Banksy, okay. Right?
Yeah, but this doesn't really do political stuff.
Well, he does in ways. I mean, painting angels on architecture when nobody was painting on the sides of buildings back in the mid 70s. I mean, public art hadn't. So he had some issues with some of his artwork being featured, and so we definitely listened to that. And then rather than trying to get permission from him to feature, we just blurred a lot of the artwork and just made him more of a metaphor for all the artists who. So it worked out well. Actually, it worked out even better than it probably would have had we featured him as the real person. So he was fictionalized. That artist was fictionalized, but it looks a lot like him and it sounds a lot like him and it's his philosophies.
That works,
but enough so that we can do it without having legal problems.
Yeah, smart move.
Yeah,
don't need to deal with defamation lawsuits and things on those lines. It's
right.
Lead up to Netflix instead. So, question: you mentioned Lexi Brown, obviously the part 2, and like. I am curious about that story of like how you all decided to use that vehicle. We're sitting on a podcast, and I'm not going to spoil it, but Lexi Brown obviously that's her storyline and discovery of this. How did you all discover?
Lexi Brown was 5 years old when her father died. Amos Brown, her father, left Frederick soon after the flood and moved to Texas and got remarried. And he married a Latina woman, and so they had this beautiful mixed race child. And I wanted to tell it from that perspective, from a mixed race in 2025, what that was like. And so Lexi Brown never moved to Frederick, but in our movie, she comes to Frederick to learn about her father's past, this thing that her father kept talking about, this great town with this great history. What was it that her dad? What was the special sauce that her dad found in downtown Frederick? And so she became then the voice of, well, she's trying to figure out through the archives and through talking with some of the older generation, like what was it that my dad actually was? What were these rebels doing back in the 70s? So she comes to find out, it wasn't preservation, it wasn't creativity, it wasn't art, it was a lot of things. It wasn't the churches, it wasn't the influence of spirituality. It was a lot of things, and they were all, and all of those together is what the preservation of the architecture, the emphasis on saving the churches, these beautiful churches, keeping them intact. The emphasis on giving and the foundations.
And the bridge.
And the bridges between people, the bridges between race that were being built, like bridges between the north side of town and the south side of town.
That unified people. And so she kind of comes to that realization too. And that actually happened metaphorically, but in reality too, we did this beautiful renovation on the creek, and I was involved in some of that early on, and they built bridges all across the creek, and the idea really was to connect two different
poor side of town to the wealthier side of town,
which on the south side of town, All Saints Street, South Street was predominantly Black historically, and so that was a way to sort of unify the communities. And in fact, the big bridge downtown was dedicated to William O. Lee, who was a great leader in Frederick. And his family also goes back generations and generations, and he was a very prominent Black leader in Frederick.
I'll ask this question more directly to the story. Lexi Brown's role as like discovery through a podcast, or using it as a podcast. Why that storytelling device? She could have came in, just asked questions of family members. She could have came in and had a day job and like discovered all this history and kind of just
Well,
been
she
like an
was,
investigative journalist in a different way. What was appealing about that storyline?
She was an art history student studying art history and archaeology.
This is the real Lexi Brown? Like, okay.
Yeah. She's going to Hood College, which is way ahead of its time when it came to...
So the character of Lexi Brown.
Yeah, I'm sorry, yeah, okay. So you're talking about the character. I'm curious, what made you decide that avenue to tell her story?
Yes.
The multiracial aspect of it. The Amos Brown, when he left, because Amos Brown couldn't have been the central character, because we needed a way to get to 2025.
Yeah.
You know, we knew we had this great story of history, and so it's all a flashback to these historical elements. So we needed somebody in present day who was trying to find out what happened. That I thought would make a good story. I mean, that is the vehicle that we used.
I think he wants to know, because he's a podcaster, he wants to know, why did you choose to make her a podcaster?
Well, because podcast is where it's at right now.
Yeah.
Well, you know, because I think about there, to your point, like there's a whole movie that's out there, and I think that is in Netflix or like that realm of like they chose true crime podcasts. Like they brought two people together. I can't remember the movie right now, but that's their way of telling the story. Like true crime podcasts are a thing, so like let's use it to make it a movie and a trope and run with it. And I don't think that's what you all decided to do. And that's why I'm curious, like, I didn't know if the real Lexi Brown, like she had this like discovery method or trait about her that made like, oh, podcasting fits naturally for the real life Lexi Brown, or if podcasting
not the real life, the character. I think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Salyer, I think that it really came about because we wanted to reach a younger audience. It was part of the goal, and that seemed really relevant right now. Podcasting, and how could she be reaching a lot of people? Okay. She's a student at Hood College. How could she be reaching a lot of people? And you see at the very end of the film, when you watch it, that she's arrived. Like, she starts out in her podcast studio, and she looks disheveled. It looks kind of disheveled. She's not real put together. She's doing an okay job. She's starting to get this thing off, the ground. And then by the end of the film, she's arrived, and she's at Hood College, and all these students, like, she's almost famous. Everybody's like running up to her, and they're excited. And then she's arriving at this big event, and everybody's like cheering for her. And at the very end of the film feels pretty strong. And so she's kind of arrived, and she's getting her message out. Her podcast is called Unmuted. And so she's speaking the truth about everything. And so that's kind of
the very thing that she's studying about her dad and how the town of Frederick was saved by preservation, creativity, art is the very thing now in 2025 that she needs to remind everybody of, to protect. Because now we're living in a culture, thanks to our leadership, that's trying to take away those creative freedoms
and funding.
So before we took that pause, you started mentioning about just the current climate that we're in when it talks about funding being stripped away from the arts and entertainment along those lines. In the earlier part of our conversation, you had talked about you have a foundation that's set up to actually attract the funding. Now, this is a project you have been working on from a funding perspective, you mentioned, for at least 2 years. So like 2 years prior to the current climate that we're in, it might have been a lot easier to fund. Can you help me understand how the foundation helped you fund this film? Because on your page, where it might be executive producers and associate producers who are actually giving money, you have foundations, you have executive sponsors, and you have associate sponsors. So are you able to walk me through that process if you're able to?
Yeah. So there's a couple aspects to that. For those filmmakers looking for unique and original ways of raising money for their films, I found early on, back in 1992, when I started Big Blue Foundation in Beverly Hills, California, that I could go to very wealthy individuals like John Paul DeJoria, who owned Paul Mitchell, and ask for lots of money if I had a foundation, versus if I was just a filmmaker coming to him with a commercial idea to invest in my movie and commercialize it. So I started doing a lot of public service, really cutting edge public service environmental messages that were showing up in the movie theaters. Eventually, we had 10,000 screens across the country, and we're doing these cutting-edge environmental messages. And so we called ourselves Big Blue Foundation. That's how we started. Mm-hmm. Flash forward to 2023, 1993, and Big Blue Foundations is still alive after 30 years. And we have this film idea about making a film about this town that we're living in, and knew that we could, the foundations in our town, for example, give away about a $12 million a year between three or four foundations.
In Frederick.
In Frederick alone. In Frederick alone. $12 million. They got to give it to the arts. They got to give it to artistic projects.
All different kinds of projects.
All different types of projects, but they lean towards
art
more.
Yeah.
And children, boys and girls clubs.
Yeah. So, wow, this is a gold mine. Let's try and tap into that.
Okay.
And it worked.
Did you what did you have to present to them in order for it to, like, did you come to them with just like a written idea? Did you come to them with like a whole pitch deck of materials, like a sizzle of it before?
Started with a concept paper.
Okay.
Then we got the endorsement of the city and tourism and the chamber.
Yeah.
With basically a one-page concept statement.
That's awesome.
Like, this is the film we want to make, and this is how we're going to do it. And we got them to endorse it. We didn't ask for any money.
Yeah, we didn't ask for money at first.
And then we went straight to the foundations. Foundations, which, by the way, have funding cycles every year at the same time. You can apply for it. And if you've got a project that takes 3 years, they'll fund you first year, second year, third year. So with the Delaplane Foundation, for instance, started $25,000, jumped to $75,000, and then jumped to another $75,000.
Did you have to apply each year, or
apply each year?
Okay, I was just
but
checking.
it's easy.
From the Delaplane Foundation, we got grants 3 times.
Yeah.
Okay.
From the same organization, because we worked on this over a 2.5-year period, but the way that it lined up, we ended up getting it 3 times from them. And then Osherman Foundation, we got funding once. And then that's really all for those kinds of, and the rest of the money was small businesses. But once you get those foundations behind you and you get the city to endorse you, they're saying, yes, we support this. The Chamber of Commerce, yes, we support what you're doing. Not necessarily financially. We didn't get money from them. We did get a little bit of money from the city. But once you have those people behind you, then you can get other business owners and so forth interested. And because we are a nonprofit, it is a tax deductible contribution for them.
Right.
So our biggest donor actually was a former client. And he just loves what Salyer does. First of all, I mean, they have a great connection with each other.
Randy Simpson.
His name's Randy.
He owns
Simpson.
an automotive group of all things, and doesn't even have a business in downtown Frederick, but just likes the idea that we're giving back to the community.
His office is in the city limits, though. He started.
But the thing about a foundation, you'd ask, well, who makes money? Like how do you survive if you're not commercializing your product? But so we get paid salaries, good salaries to direct and produce and write. We get good to sustain us over the course of a year. All that money goes back into more films that are made for good causes. So whether it's an environmental thing or a historical docudrama, if you can show on paper that the mission is for a greater purpose, our films are for a greater cause, then you can get funding for that, and you just keep doing it now. We're working on a couple other projects that are similar.
And so most of your projects that you're working on when it comes to the film-based work,
greater good.
They're always tied to like a foundational cause or mission, as opposed to just like, let me just go do like a corporate thing, or like it's something it has some type of.
They won't all be that way, but this particular one definitely was, and it's a great way to do it. And I mean, we really do want to make films that make a difference. I mean, that's really always been Salyer's goal. I know that. I mean, he started in doing environmental work out in LA, and so it's always been his goal to do films that are going to make a difference in someone.
Raise awareness of different social and cultural issues.
Yeah.
So
if you can do it in a really creative way. You can do it in a really creative way.
Nowadays, you can do so much with it.
Yeah.
To your point, I mean, some people might have attacked this story from just a straight documentary talking head archival footage, and it might have been the thought you thought about doing before, but then for reasons that we already explained, like it forced a different creative way to tell the story.
It's
and
a
yet
blessing.
You're still able to tell the impact. You're still able to have the awareness raised, and you're also able to do it in a very emotional driven way that kind of draws people in beyond just the customary, let me just give the facts. And so
the docudramas allow
wouldn't have been there, I don't think. So
allow a lot more emotion to come in. The recreations, or I started doing I had really never directed actors. Have you ever directed actors on set? I mean, it's. I mean, directing, your guests, but I mean, directing actors is there's an art to that. I had done. We shot a lot of commercials over my career, mostly high end commercials, but they were all driven by music and visual, and there's not a lot of. I've never been a lot of acting, so I was scared to death. I felt like I had to bring in a co-director, and as a blessing in disguise, I never was able to find a co-director that could work with me, and so I had to do this. I just had to direct this myself on set with help from my wife and my ADs, but docudrama just opens creativity in ways that were totally unexpected for me, and I did a little bit with that documentary that I did with the jeweler, but.
That was great. That got us.
The second part of this film is all drama. It's all there. There's very little. There's no interviews at all. No talking heads throughout the film. It's all jumping pretty much from one recreation to another, using headlines at times because of the newspaper angle, which I thought was another good choice. Yeah,
nice avenue.
Yeah. And so we had access to all the original newspapers from 120 years, the headlines of the original papers. So we're not using, electronically generated imaging. We're shooting it, so all that old coloration and all that you get.
It brings me kind of to the question. I know you worked a lot on production design, and so just bringing all these materials together, whether it be the newspaper, whether it be possibly old looking cars, the buildings, the clothing, Again, you all started with the idea of a documentary.
Yeah.
Then you shift to docudrama.
Right.
Now you're like, how do I recreate these worlds? Can you talk a little bit about recreating the world from the on-set look and feel?
Of course, for me, it was way more exciting to do this. It meant I had more creative input. But it wasn't all me. I mean, it was a big group effort. Like Salyer really focused on, he brought the cars in.
Nice.
I mean, so it wasn't just me, but I am an interior designer by education and by trade. And construction manager. So I have a lot of knowledge with those things and how to sort of project manage and bring things together. So it was very exciting, and I love fashion. So it was very exciting to recreate these time periods. It's a lot of fun. It is really hard in a lot of ways, but it's a lot of fun. One of the most challenging scenes, I think we were going to talk about that, but one of the most challenging scenes was, so they were about to tear down the old Frederick News-Post building. The old Frederick News-Post building was about to be torn down and turned into a big hotel, which is a great thing. But we had a very limited time to film. They said we could film in there, and it pretty much looked exactly like it did back in the 70s. There hadn't been any remodeling. There just wasn't furniture in it, but they still had a bunch of the old metal desks from the 70s down in the lower level, and they said we could use that. We could film in there. It was great. We were just going to have to sort of come in there and bring some other elements in and set it up.
Just days before they were going to demolish it.
Literally, we had to hurry up and do it. So they said yes. We were ready to go. And at the last minute, one of the older people in the family said no.
Well, we also were asking them if we could flood the basement for the great flood of 1976 recreation. So all of a sudden, that kind of got their attention.
All of a sudden, literally a week before we're going to film, we couldn't film in there. And so we had to find a new location. So Salyer insisted he found a new location at the new Frederick News-Post building. There were some vacant offices on the floors upstairs. And he said, he'll be fine. And, but now we don't have any of that furniture there. We don't have then now you got to bring everything. There was a lot of stuff I could have used at that building. So now we are in a new commercial building, or newish commercial building. And the floor that we were going to use is carpeted with acoustical ceiling tiles and furniture from the early 2000s. Okay. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't do this. How am I going to do this? So I'm really proud of those scenes because I think people have complimented those a lot. It really gives you the feeling like you are in a newsroom from the 1970s. And that was all created. There was nothing there. I had to personally rent a big truck and bring those. I borrowed those desks. Had to find old desks, and they're heavy as all get out.
Is this all local that you're able to source this from? Or
yes,
perfect. I love
that. We brought stuff from various places. I put stuff out on Facebook. Hey, we need old typewriters. Anybody got old typewriters sitting around? got about 6 or 7 old typewriters. I mean, it was a big group effort, and I had a couple of people helping me with it too, but it was really a community effort and pulling all of that together. And the way it turned out, I think it really looks very realistic. And there's a feeling about it. And it also wasn't just my design. It was also the way we lit it, the way Salyer loves to use the fog machines, which creates like this depth.
Different texture layers.
Different texture. And it really creates this different kind of feeling. So the lighting had everything to do with it and those kinds of elements. But and then the wardrobe, of course, and all that. But I really was very proud of how that came out. I mean, I just think it really looks authentic.
It looked beautiful.
Thanks.
Yeah, you really did feel like, that's why I was like, where did you find the location? I just assumed that was all kind of, somewhere that you're able to just walk into and maybe add some things, but to know that you did have it and then pull from up under you at the very last moment and to kind of shift everything around. So I did a great job.
Those are all downtown Frederick locations, so we shot it all in downtown.
Awesome.
That was helpful.
How were some things that were being designed from the production design? How did it influence like your direction, your angles that you decided to use, your cinematography that you're able to use?
So let's see. We had an important scene, the 1968 scene in Asbury Church. We've got maybe 40 to 50 choir singers and another 10 or 20 in the aisles and in the pews, and you've got stained glass everywhere, and you're shooting big lights through that stained glass into a room that's full of smoke,
fog, haze.
Let's
There
call
we go.
it haze.
Haze.
Churches don't like it when you say
Haze.
smoke.
You got a little haze.
Yeah, they don't.
It's
Well,
just
actually
haze.
the haze.
There's no chemicals left with haze.
There you go.
There's plenty of chemicals left with smoke, but we're not talking about smoke. Okay, we're just talking
It was.
We're just talking
haze.
haze.
Haze. Just talking haze.
Haze in
It
the
goes
can.
right
That's
away.
all.
It does sometimes.
And then all of a sudden, the guys in there, and some places just filling up with this thick haze. And the way it's lit with the stained glass and everything, all of a sudden it covers up a lot of mistakes. A lot of modern stuff that's you could see, you can't see the black monitors and the modern monitors. So you're playing a scene from 1968, and all of a sudden now on the tight shots is all the spirit of the people there and how they're dressed and their glasses that they're wearing and the way they're singing the song. So it's a great way to cover up a lot of modern stuff when you can fill a space like that.
Even the exit signs and, like he said, monitors that are mounted. They didn't want us moving those. Got like huge TV monitors, on the walls, and it's supposed to be 1968. You've got exit signs that are definitely not from 1968. So we had to find creative ways to cover those things up, or have the cinematographer make sure they avoid that in their shot. And we did a pretty good job of it. I mean, at one point we were shooting a scene at Asbury Church I'll never forget, and I look over, and I didn't have as much control over the wardrobe on that one because we had a local woman who's actually Amos Brown's real sister, who was helping us pull that community together at Asbury Church. And I should have probably interjected a little more control over it because there were a few little things. Most people wouldn't notice, but I would. We're filming. We're in a big scene. Everybody's singing. It's beautiful. And I look over. I'm like, oh, my God, that woman has an Apple Watch on.
I was going to say, there wasn't a Starbucks cup, right? It's like, oh,
but
man.
There was a phone once in someone's pocket, and I could see it, and there was an Apple Watch. And I'm like, and of course, I'm not supposed to say cut because I'm not the director, but I was like, cut. And Sally's looking at me like he's ready to kill me. I'm like, no, we have to. She's got an Apple Watch on. I can see it. Because I was looking at the monitor.
Yeah.
Because I look at the monitors too. And they're zoomed up on this person, and she had an Apple Watch. I'm like, oh, God. We missed it because her sleeve just came up, and there it was,
It happens.
You miss stuff like that. So continuity is really challenging.
I was going to ask you, especially I'm not sure how many shoot days there were over the course of the years, and you can say that if you want.
16.
16. So just the ability to stay organized, across the board, whether it be the costume, production, how did you all maintain that? I know you're project management, but.
Yeah, we learned a lot. I mean, I certainly learned a lot because we had never done this, and it's pretty massive compared to what we're normally doing. The closest thing to it was, like he said, that Colonial Jewelers commercial, which is more like a documentary. But less people. I mean, it was a documentary, but not for their own use. But so we learned a lot. Continuity is huge. and it's challenging, and you really need more than one set of eyes on it. And on part 2, I had an AD who was really good at that, working with me, and he would help catch things too. On part 1, I really didn't quite have that same help, but we still caught a lot of it. And then, we really only, like you said, it was like maybe 16 days of shooting total for part 1 and 2. And it was really only over about a 15-month period total for both parts.
The production, everything else.
So it really was not that far apart.
Yeah.
Like the acting and everything, if a character was coming back, it wasn't that long ago that they were playing that role. Now maybe they're supposed to be 10 years older or whatever it was. So that part wasn't really that hard, but that continuity piece is key. And labeling I certainly can do things better on the next one with wardrobe. We were learning along the way.
Sure.
We did a pretty good job, much better on part 2. Organizing the wardrobe and having a space to do that. We were in a lot of old buildings. Like, for instance, we were filming in the mayor's office, both in part 1 and part 2, in his actual office. He would vacate his office. He did this for us. Very nice. He would leave his office to us for hours on end, and there's security and everything there, and there's not really a lot of space to do anything. And, you're in a little tiny, corridor in the hallway, and people are trying to change clothes, and it gets messy, and they're all creative, so they're just throwing stuff everywhere. So labeling those clothes and everything is really key, and having one person kind of dedicated to watch that, babysit that. And I didn't always have that, and I think, going forward,
we're shooting
learning.
We're shooting in like 14 different venues, 40 different central characters, 400 people to put it together. What would cost, millions of dollars we did for $500,000, and because it would be ridiculous. Nobody would do that. Like, no, we're not going to do that. Let's simplify the whole thing.
Yeah.
But when you're trying to depict the history of a town with lots of central characters, you have to go there. So it's like we didn't shoot part 2 because we didn't have the money to shoot. We shot it in 2 parts because we had to raise enough money for part 2.
Yeah.
So we had to wait for that funding cycle from one of the foundations in order to get the money to complete production. So,
Okay. Did you all anticipate? I mean, obviously, again, we can regurgitate the shift from documentary to docudrama, but did you all anticipate the 15 locations, the 40 characters, the 400 people? Like, when you're like, let's do this, like, and then it's your first one going.
You don't know. It just grows. It goes. You script something, and I'm trying to script the best story I can to tell,
right,
with very little experience, with really knowing the production costs of this. So I wasn't really working with a line producer at that time. I was basically writing the most creative ideas I could without much thought as to how much it was all going to cost until we got to the nuts and bolts of part 2. And then I realized what's going to save us a lot of money is let's just get everybody on a package deal. So we need our DPs for 6 straight days. Mm-hmm. And most films, that's why most films are shot over a very short period of time. Consolidate all your production, your weather stays consistent, your actors don't age too much, and but in our case we had to spread it out over a couple years, so it made it a little trickier. It made it a little bit more costly, but we did learn some things. So part 2, we consolidated into a much shorter time frame and saved some money that way.
I mean, you can spend a fortune on wardrobe alone. It's really challenging. And thank God for Amazon. Because I got a lot of stuff there, and our actors, you can really tap in. A lot of actors have quite a bit of wardrobe. If they've been doing it a while, they can be really helpful. So I would make these concept sheets with photographs of people from 1972 or whatever it was. And I would say, it's going to be summer 1972 in Maryland. This is the look I need you to try. And then I would have them send me pictures via email of what they had, what they thought they were going to, because some people like to do their own thing if they're really into acting. And so I'd say, okay, send me some photos of what you've got. They'd send me pictures of clothes laid out on their bed, or they would have them on. And then I would say, okay, I like that number 2. I like that one. Bring that one just in case, and then I would go through all of that, get them ready. We're on the set, and on occasion, not too often, thankfully, but on occasion, I'd have them all ready. I like how they look. Everybody around me is like, oh yeah, it looks great. They go out there and Sarah's like, I don't like that shirt.
As you fold your legs, like, yep, that was me.
And at that point, you're not going to argue with them because, you're just going to have to I'm like, what don't you like about it? I don't know. I just don't like it. Okay. All right. So we had that sometimes. So we have a bit of a wardrobe, that we keep a little bit. We've accumulated some. And then the Maryland Ensemble Theater, which is in Frederick, their wardrobe person was really helpful. She really saved us on some things with wardrobe and props at no charge. I mean, they were really helpful. And then there's a local woman who's been involved in theater and runs the theater program at Catoctin High School, who has her whole entire basement. She's been in theater so long. She just had literally her whole basement is props and wardrobe. And I pay her, not a lot. She didn't ask for a lot, but it takes hours to go through her stuff. I mean, it's kind of crazy. So you find some stuff there. Goodwill is not as, people, Sally's always like, just go to Goodwill. It's not the same anymore. You're not going to find clothes from the 1970s at Goodwill anymore. Yeah. You might find stuff from the late 2000s. I mean, it's not the same as it used to be. So you're not going to find much at Goodwill anymore. It's challenging. Yeah.
Bless you. Sorry, if you have more to say,
yeah.
please.
Oh, no, it's just challenging as to where to find these things. Luckily, one thing that really can help the look a lot is the hair, obviously, and glasses and things like that. Accessories can really change the look a lot. And I was able to find a lot of those things just on Amazon and things like that online. Really helpful, too, because it can just, if a guy is supposed to be a news reporter from 1968, I mean, basically, as long as he has a white dress shirt on, and a tie that's appropriate for that time period, the glasses can really change it. If you get the right glasses from the right time period, where they look like that really helped a lot. And then the hairstyles. We didn't always have hair and makeup for everything. Okay. On part 1, we didn't. I had to do a lot of that with helpers. On part 2, we did. It's a matter of what you have in your budget.
Filmmaking process has changed a bit, too. At this really long frame now that we're working in, right? I mean, it just seems to get longer and longer every day. You push that thing out, how long is that going to be? So if it just becomes a band, right? Your living room is just a band. You shoot tighter. Because, you're not shooting height as much all of a sudden. So there were a lot of things working to our favor, which was helpful in telling a period film. And one was our shots were a lot tighter. So it was important. Those glasses that were being worn, or the style of makeup, or the beard or the mustache, if it was the 70s. All that was much more important than normal. But the backgrounds weren't as important. So we shot a lot of tighter photography, and that helped.
It's a great note.
Yeah. Makes it more intimate. I mean, you get your establishing shot, but then he tends to shoot tight anyway, because the one thing Salyer's really good at, and why I think docudramas are really appropriate for what we're doing, is because he has always been, even with our commercial stuff, he's really good at bringing out the emotion, whatever it is. When we were doing TV commercials and things, I mean, we did Mattress Warehouse commercials for years. It does not sound very exciting, but you should check some of them out. They're pretty cool.
I mean, we're
cool.
I think I'm about to go to sleep on it, but it's like, no, anyway, it's just like, you might get a tearjerker from it.
To another level, I'm telling you.
Well, might cry in my dreams now. Just telling me, like.
Well, I mean, we were creating science fiction sleep laboratories, and we were getting people that we were shooting underwater, people floating in heaven. I mean, it was
Ricky and Lucy
ridiculous.
commercial from I Love
$200,000 commercials, and it was all like.
Yeah.
Sounds fun. Now that sounds fun. It does not sound like you're just visiting a massive warehouse with a whole bunch of mattresses just laying around.
No, we'll have to send you some of those. They're pretty interesting.
Looking forward.
But he has a way of reaching people in a different way than you might normally do that. And so I think docudramas are really a good avenue for us to keep pursuing because he's really good at that. He does bring people to tears. We've had many people that have seen Boomtown. They've come out of that theater and they've told me that they were brought to tears. And that makes me happy.
I just want to ask you all, what are you most proud about for the film as we close?
I hope that it inspires those who see it to look at what we're capable of doing in a slightly different way. We may be looking at the same thing, but it's how we're looking at it. And what I learned in making this film is what changed Frederick is what is necessary today. We need to recognize where we came from. We need to reconcile those things that we need to reconcile. We need to forgive those who we need to forgive. And we need to protect the things that the art and the creativity, which is what has made Frederick the town it is. Mm-hmm. And, we're living in a time right now, we're being challenged in so many ways. And I hope that our film, as Lexi says, revolutions don't ask for permission. We need to take this on. Each person needs to understand the effect that they can have. And in many ways, art is the revolution. Creativity can change the world. And, money, when you're competing against, the deep money in this world and the greed and the corruption, the only thing that's going to save us ultimately is being more creative in how we get through these times. So we need to, recognize how we got here and protect that and then take that and do everything we can to make sure that we protect this for our children and their children.
Not go backwards.
Yeah, you got to come, man. You got to come. Come to the film festival this summer.
I will.
June.
Let me know about it. Put it on my calendar. Absolutely. I appreciate you both.
Thank you.
This has been awesome.
Yes,
thank you so much. I'm looking forward to sitting down and watching Boomtown, but hopefully much more than just myself do the same.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, of course. Thanks again.